All right, as a recap of where we've been, we are on the backside of Section 1, Mod 6, weld quality. Primarily all we've talked about is the code organizations. Welding codes and provisions. We've talked about various weld coding organizations, and we've talked about ways to identify and describe the basic provisions of welding codes and the terms that are related to them. These are some of the trade terms that you guys had in your matching. We're going to review these again this week. It's important that you know them. Welding codes and governing codes. Welding work is covered by codes, standards, and specifications. Tune in on that, please, because you need to know the difference between the three, and it can be a little confusing until you read it a couple times and understand it. This is what a welding code is. It's a set of requirements covered under permissible materials, covering permissible materials. Basically, it's going to describe in detail exactly how specific welds are done depending on what you're welding. Pressure vessels, pipelines, buildings, etc. If somebody's paying you to build something that's going to be carrying anything or have anything to do with people or certain locations, whether you're offshore, onshore, there's going to be rules of how this is done. If you don't do it by the rules, it's probably going to break and everybody gets in trouble. Therefore, the codes are designed to cover you. If you weld up to code and it breaks, then you're covered. So it's important to understand what a code is, why it's there, and the importance of following it. Codes and standards. Wait, let's go back to standard. Standard is a document that defines how the code is to be implemented. Specifications are detailed instructions for producing a product or performing a task. Specifications tell you how to apply the codes. All right. Clients specify the contract code, standards, and specifications that will be used. Codes and standards that apply to welding, safety, and quality have been developed and are published by a number of. When you look up a code, you have to know who published it in order to be able to look it up. So if you're going to look up a AWS code, you wouldn't look in the ASME code book, and vice versa. All these are three different coding organizations. ANSI, I believe. Let's go down here where it talks about ANSI. ANSI does not actually prepare standards. It adopts standards. ANSI standards deal with dimensions, rating, terminology, and symbols. That's not the problem. Safety specifications for materials. Many codes used today have been so ANSI adopts codes. They study them and decide, for example, safety classes, ANSI approved. They read the codes and decided this is one that we think is a good one, so it's ANSI. They're kind of like the consumer reports. We talked about American Welding Society, American Petroleum Institute, National Standards Institute. These are all different organizations. Canadian Welding Bureau is actually pretty big in the U.S. Maritime deals with offshore, anything offshore, whether it's ships, whether it's underwater welding, aluminum hull welding, offshore platform welding, quality workmanship. It's important that you understand that not every one of your welds is going to be tested, x-rayed, visual exam, but you're going to have random checks. And you need to weld every weld when you step back and look at it and say, I'm done. Treat it as if it's going to be inspected. You never know when one of your welds is going to be inspected, and they all need to be able to pass. There's going to be times when you're going to have to potentially go over or around the chain of command. Everybody should be able to work with their site rep. You got to learn how to get along, got to learn how to be professional. But if you're being put in a position where you know that you're being asked to do something that's unsafe, or you know that you're being asked to do something that you don't have the training or the certifications in the area, then you need to call the boss, call the next guy up the chain, and confirm that this is what you want to do, and explain to him about your concerns. You don't want to walk off a job. You don't want to get in a fight. You don't want to do anything that could jeopardize your position. And because that's a requirement, or that's something that you need to know about, that's why we talk about the management structure. You need to know the management structure. Who's the next in the chain of command. Basic provisions of welding code, WPQ, WPQ, WPQ. Welding procedure qualification, welder performance, welding operator. What's a welding operator? Well, welding operator is a guy that's operating a piece of welding equipment. We used the example in the lab recently while using the track torch. That's a machine that we're operating. We don't have our hand on the cutting torch, but we're still cutting, but we're operating a machine instead of the torch. Therefore, we're a cutting torch operator. We're not necessarily we don't have, it's not our hands. Welder performance qualification, that would be the welding machine is in your hand. You have to demonstrate that you have the ability to perform with it. And then the welding procedure qualification, those are that's qualifying the WPS. The welding procedure specification is going to tell you how to do something, but all those procedures have to be qualified. So all these different qualifications is qualifying the operator, qualifying the welder, and qualifying the WPS. It's real easy if you think about it that way. Qualify the machine operator, qualify the welder, and qualify the WPS. People can't just fill out a WPS without qualifying it. They think they know. They're going to guess, okay, this is probably how we do it. Now let's go and do it in real life and see if it works. Okay, it works. So that's the qualification process. Machine welding is covered on the same codes, yeah. Welding procedures are a written document, but they have to be qualified. That's what we just talked about. Here's an example of a welding procedure specification. WPS. We've got these for the certification event on every single one of the. It tells in detail exactly how you're going to do it, so everybody's doing exactly the same thing. WPS variables, essential and non-essential. We talked about that last week. It's essential that you have to breathe. It's not essential that you get a Coke after school. Some things you have to do, some things you have the option. Essentials are outlined. They are things like the welding procedure specification, can't change it. Essential variables vary by code and welding process. They refer to specific code and welding processes. Here's some examples of essentials. How thick the metal is. What kind of filler metal, what kind of electrode you use. What kind of joint. Is it a T-joint? Is it a lap joint? Is it a groove? Types of base metal. Is it aluminum? Is it metal? How thick is it? What the welding process is. Shielded metal arc, TIG, stick, MIG, current, AC, DC, pre and post heatment. Do you need to preheat it or post heat it? Non-essential variables are the things that you can change, such as your amperage, travel speed, shielding gas. Those are non-essential. You have the options here. WPS for use by welding test coupon. Here's an example of a WPS by welding test coupon. Welder performance qualification. That means testing the welder to make sure that he can pass a test. Welding machine operator. Can you operate the equipment? Do you know how to do it correctly? Additional resources. Which of the following documents is often adopted into law? Codes. A WPQ, welding procedure qualification test, is used to qualify a welder to perform a specific procedure. True. So it's a weld test. All right, we've covered section 1. And now we've recovered it. We're going to have some more material in here for section 1. and we're going to work on some lab work this week. Thank you for watching.